Thank you very much for that. And after the Modi government presented its last full-year budget in office, it's time to take stock, decode the budget and understand the fine print and talk to one of the sharpest critics of this budget. And who better than former Finance Minister Chidambaram in conversation with us right here at ET Now. Thank you very much for being with us. You did a press conference immediately after the budget. You had a column that came after and you spoke about courage. But enough time has lapsed, and I want to ask you, and you wear many hats, and one of those hats is a politician's hat, and one expects you to criticize the budget. You are a member of the opposition. But that set aside, will you concede that this has been a balancing act of sorts in very difficult times?
That depends on how you define difficult times. The difficulties are evident. If they had done a rescue act, or even a partial rescue act, I would have been happy. But this budget does nothing to rescue the economy from the situation in which it finds. It has done nothing for investments, nothing for savings, nothing to increase demand. So why do you say that this is a balanced budget?
I'll get to why I say it's a balanced budget, and I will quote the finance minister on this. But, you know, a lot of people within your party and a lot of commentators outside have said this is an election budget. This is a budget that came out of the Gujarat verdict. What is wrong in reading a response that comes out of a Gujarat verdict and responding to it? That's what responsible governments are meant to do. And if Gujarat threw up the dire straits that India's farms are in, what is wrong in having a rural thrust? I mean, what is wrong with reading a Gujarat verdict and responding to it via a budget?
I didn't say that. So why are you putting the question to me?
That's a criticism that has been made.
I didn't say that. I can only answer for what I have said. All I say is your so-called rural thrust is, according to me, a jumla. Your so-called healthcare thrust is the biggest jumla I've seen. You announce what you call the world's largest government-funded healthcare program. You go through the budget at a glance, you go through your expenditure statement, and you find it's the world's largest unfunded government announcement.
I will come to that in just a bit, but you started your piece by saying, you started your comments by saying that they haven't done the balancing act. I know it's good to be fiscally prudent. I would have lauded them more had they stuck to 3.2, but this is an exceptional year. They've rolled out a GST, they have revenues for only 11 months, expenditure of 12. So they've just about breached the fiscal deficit at 3.5%. A lot of people say, at a time like this, when there is such a tough economy to manage, does it make any sense to be a fiscal fundamentalist?
You set for yourself a target of 3.2. You have now arrived at a revised estimate of 3.5.
That's right.
The 0.3 gives you about 54,000 crore. Now tell me, what have they used this 54,000 crore for? If they use the 54,000 crore for a specific purpose, with a specific goal in mind, I would have accepted the breaching of the fiscal deficit target. But this 54,000 crore has gone into a deep hole.
Are you also
Tell me where it has gone. Where has it gone?
I understand. And I understand you believe, this is not investment that will accrue any benefits. But are you also concerned about an ONGC kind of a deal? Are you also concerned about the PSU bank? I know you've spoken about that.
I've said it. I said to this 3.5, you must add the 37,000 crore that they got from ONGC. You must also add the 80,000 crore that they are getting from the banks.
But the fact that the finance ministry and the finance minister have made their intentions clear about accepting and endorsing the FRBM panel report, reducing the debt to the GDP ratio to 40%, are these things, does this impress you at all? I mean, isn't that a step in the right direction?
What is the point of accepting a recommendation when you discard it in your first year? Are you accepting it for a future government?
So, would you have perhaps been all right if they had breached it to 3.5% this year and kept their target of 3% next year? Because what they've effectively done is they're going to be 3.3% next year, eventually get to 3% only in 2020. Is that something
This
that's bothering
3%
you?
target is something we should have achieved, but for the
In
international
2008.
But for the international financial crisis, this 3% target should have been achieved, I think, in 2008, 9 or 9, 10. Actually, we achieved 2.7% in 2007-8. Be that as it may. Ever since this government came, it has shifted the goalpost every year. Read what the finance minister said in his first budget. Take the fiscal deficit at the first budget stage and where we stand today. Therefore, I don't think they were very serious about this 3% target. Even when they appointed the NK Singh committee, I had cautioned that this should not become a ruse to defer the 3% target. But that's a separate issue. Even if I have to concede that 3.5% was necessary, there is no answer to my question, where did this extra 54,000 crore go, along with the 37,000 which the ONGC gave them? I know where the 80,000 went, so forget it. So 54,000 plus 37,000 is a 91,000 crore. Where did this 91,000 crore go?
Are you saying this is all
Did it go?
expenditure?
Did it go into public investment? No. Did it go into stimulating aggregate demand? No. Where did it go?
So are you saying it was all wasteful expenditure?
Yes.
What would you have done if you were finance minister?
This is,
No, I will tell you
this
why.
question I never answer.
No, I will tell you why. Because you've got revenues of just 11 months from the GST. There hasn't been enough compliance. You were going to be falling short of your targets here. How do you then manage the fisc? And also, we must not lose sight of the fact that the public investment is the only cycle that's, that's revving up right now. That's the only cycle that's pushing growth. Can you curtail that?
I don't know why you keep on saying we got 11 months of GST. GST was introduced only on the 1st of July 2016. So where do you get your 11 months in the first place?
The finance minister's speech and the...
That's wrong. If GST was introduced on 1st of July 2016, it's only 9 months.
They mean indirect taxes from there and the projections from here. And
so why do you call it 11 months of GST? I don't understand. You got your first 3 months of excise and service tax,
yes,
and nothing affected that. So I think all this is, whatever they say, you guys accepted without questioning their numbers.
Let me talk about a number here. The expenditure growth has been reined in at 9.1% versus a nominal GDP growth of 11.5%. Many people believe this is going to be done at the cost of public sector investment. As somebody who is fiscally prudent like you are, you decisively tried to control the fisc when you came back to the finance ministry. At least, is this something that impresses you? That they haven't gone for a splurge in an election year?
They had no option. Even with this level of expenditure, they have breached the fiscal deficit target. If they had expended more, they would have breached it more. And that would have had serious consequences for the interest rate, for bonds, for foreign direct investment, serious consequences. As it is, I warned even before the finance minister rose to make a speech. I said, the economic survey has laid out the diagnosis. Let's see what the finance minister does. And I said, if you fail the test of fiscal consolidation, you will pay a very serious price.
But can a growing economy, can a developing economy like ours be obsessed with fiscal deficit at the cost of investments? Private sector is not investing at all.
That is again your fault. Your policies do not encourage private sector to invest. It's your fault. Therefore, you can't blame the private sector for not investing because of the policies that you are following, the climate you have created. You have created a climate where no private sector industrialist wants to invest in India. He would rather invest abroad.
But that investment slowed down a while back, even before they came to office. Yes, the expectation was that they would come to office and private sector would begin investing. You're right, that hasn't happened.
What happened in 2012-13 and 13-14 is history. I was pulling back the economy from where it had got a bit derailed. I was pulling back the fiscal deficit. I was pulling back the current account deficit. So that is history. question is, we start with where the UPA left. The UPA left them a certain fiscal deficit, 4.8 or so. And they promised to bring it down to 3% by the end of their term.
And they haven't
And they
done
failed. My question is not only that they failed to achieve the target. My question is even more important. Question is, where did this money go? Has this money translated into additional investment? Has it translated into additional welfare? Has it translated into stimulating aggregate demand? I don't see reflection anywhere. The four engines of growth, only exports have
finally picked up.
Finally picked up over the last few months. But even exports are well below the level that we achieved in 2013-14.
Which was upwards of 20%.
But where did this money go? There's no answer to that.
Okay, let me just talk to you about the future outlook, and they are projecting tax revenue growth of 16%. Direct taxes, they insist, are up 18%, and that will carry on. The elephant in the room, even the finance minister accepts and concedes, is GST. They're obviously placing a lot of bets on the GST. Do you, as somebody who's worn that hat before, accept, and do you expect the GST to stabilize? Why are you so skeptical about revenues going forward?
I'm not making any predictions on revenues. All I'm pointing out is there are assumptions on tax revenues for 2018-19 are extremely aggressive. Income tax is expected to grow at 19.8%. GST is supposed to jump 67%.
Because they expect that it will stabilize. They expect that it will be compliant. I interviewed the finance minister earlier
today,
and I
should have
asked
thought
him
through all that before you launched GST. It could, this 4,44,631 perhaps represents 9 months of GST or 8 months of GST, I don't know. The government continues to say 11 months. I don't count 11 months from 1st of July. Next year they're projecting 7,43,900 crore. It's a 67% jump. But somebody must explain to us how this jump is going to happen.
Because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why they put in this figure. We questioned the finance minister on that, and they believe, the government believes, the finance minister believes, that now the carrot approach alone can't work, and the traders will have to be nudged. They will have to be anti-evasion means in works to have GST compliance. Why are you skeptical?
See, this is a government which applies muscular, militaristic approach to everything, from Kashmir to traders.
But doesn't some part of the blame also lie on the trader community?
See, please understand.
They wanted GST, now they're not willing to comply.
You have to create a climate where voluntary compliance becomes possible. Yes, there must be deterrence, there must be penal action. But you can't run an economy carrying a big stick all the time. You have to run an economy where there is mutual trust between the tax collector and the taxpayer. There's an atmosphere where voluntary tax compliance becomes the norm. More and more people voluntarily pay their taxes. But I don't expect anything different from this government. As I said, from Kashmir to taxes, their approach is muscular, militaristic.
I'll keep Kashmir and the politics aside, but I will ask you, you've been a finance minister. Isn't it a frustrating experience? Indians don't like to pay taxes. Everybody has moved to the GST, but look at the levels of compliance. And you can't blame it all on the GST being too complicated, too complex.
Of course. I blame it solely on the fact that the GST design was flawed. Its implementation was hasty. Adequate preparation was not done.
So now some parts have been eased, now some parts have been made safe.
As things
Do you accept compliance now?
Of course, I would urge everyone to comply. But if it's impossible to comply or so difficult to comply, then obviously there will be people who take advantage of the loopholes or advantage of the complications that have been created. Please remember that example where a bunch of chartered accountants and traders went to Ahmedabad, went to that facilitation office of the GST and said, we can't fill this form, you fill it. No officer, after struggling for 3 hours, could fill that form.
I want to turn focus away from the numbers and what we're talking about into the mainstay of the budget. At least that's what they claim it to be, and that's the rural push. A lot of commentators out there have said that MSP on cost plus 50% is not just going to be inflationary, it will disincentivize production at a lower cost and may even hamper efficiency. Can we apply principles of economics when there is such rural distress?
When the UPA was in power, we believed that price was the best signal to the farmer, and we therefore gave generous increases in MSP. When the NDA came to power, they reversed that. In the first 3 years, they squeezed MSP prices in order to control inflation. They may have succeeded in taming down inflation, but that drove the farm sector into acute distress. The farm sector has still not come out of that distress. Then they realized that they were wrong. In the 4th year, they tried to become generous. And now they say we're going to give cost plus 50%. Unexplained issues. Which cost?
They talk about A2.
I'm asking, is it C1 plus FL or is it C2 cost? We don't know. They have to explain that. And then there's one throwaway sentence. We have already given it to some crops and we will give it to all. Dr. Swaminathan has asked the question, which crops have you given cost plus 50%? You don't name the crops.
So then in principle you are not opposed to what they have done. You are basically pulling them up for perhaps being a little too late with it and not being clear enough.
I've always believed that price is the best signal to the farmer. And instead of giving this subsidy and that subsidy, the best is to give him a remunerative price.
So you are not someone who shares the concern that this will be inflationary. You're happy that there's a higher food subsidy burden, even if that means it may be inflationary, because the health of the India farmer matters as well.
No. Listen, giving a MSP price and subsidizing the consumer are not mutually inconsistent. You can give the farmer, farmers producer prices. You give the farmer a good MSP. If you want to protect the vulnerable consumer, you subsidize the consumer. In fact, the National Food Security Act, to a large extent, secures the vulnerable section. It also subsidizes the vulnerable section. They have not implemented the National Food Security Act. And the Supreme Court came down heavily upon this government and said the implementation is pathetic.
So whatever I gather from your statements, you are in principle not opposed to what they have done on the MSP. You obviously oppose the fact that they couldn't do anything for the first 3.5 years.
No, you're reading me. I don't oppose a generous MSP. But I'm saying you have not done it. If you have done it, you have not explained what you have done.
Are you at least, as somebody who's fiscally prudent, are you at least happy with the fact that they haven't doled out farm loan waivers like some of the state governments have?
They don't have the money to do that.
If they had the money, would you have preferred that?
That will depend upon the situation. In 2008, there was a situation when we had to waive the loans of farmers, and we did it consciously, and I'm proud that we did it.
Do you believe that situation arises now?
It has arisen in states, which is why UP, Punjab, Maharashtra and a couple of other states have done farm loan waivers. Their own BJP state governments have done farm loan waivers. If the situation did not arise in the states, why do state BJP governments waive farm loans?
As someone who likes fiscal discipline, how can you support farm loan waivers today? You say macroeconomic stability is very important. You say the health of banks is very important. And then what happens to credit discipline today?
What happens to the distress?
Because there needs to be deep-rooted agricultural reforms.
No, you've asked the question. Please wait for the answer.
Sure, sir.
You have sent 12 companies to insolvency.
That's right.
What is the haircut you're going to take there? The first 3 cases of haircut, smaller cases, one is a big case, the haircut has been 80%. If all the 12 companies eventually go into insolvency and not resolution, and you take a haircut of 80%, how much is that going to mean? So don't treat farmers as a class that does not deserve sympathy, and only the industrial class deserves sympathy, the corporate sector deserves sympathy. If there is distress, you must give relief. Whether there is distress, to what extent they are entitled to relief is a matter of judgment, the objective situation. But as a principle, I believe that where there's distress, government is obliged to extend relief.
No, as a matter of ideology and principle, I agree with you. Let me just turn focus to the first thing that you said, and that's the healthcare scheme, the world's largest government
The
funded
world's
health.
largest jumla.
Where is that word Jumla being picked
I
up
don't
by the
know.
Congress party from? But I'm going to ask you. You have called it amounts to a kite being flown without a string
Yes.
because proper allocations haven't been
I have
made.
got the budget at a glance.
Yes, yes.
I have got the speech. Show me
They're
one
talking
line.
about a very, very meager allocation of 2,000 crore rupees. The Niti Aayog
No,
today
no, the
clarified-
2,000 is not for this scheme. 2,000 is for an existing scheme.
Yes, but they're talking about a budgetary. They'd say that a support of about 8 to 10,000 crore rupees
How?
will be required. That's the back of the
What
envelope
kind of
calculations.
arithmetic is that? I have done my homework and I'm willing to give you the numbers.
I'll just come to the numbers. But will you deny this is a political masterstroke?
It's a political jumla and people will see it as a political jumla after 6 months.
You don't think health for all is a political masterstroke?
It is, but this is not the masterstroke. This is a gimmick.
The Niti Aayog today clarified, the finance minister told us earlier today that it will require 8 to 10,000 crore rupees, and when
I've
it's
seen
required,
3
I
numbers.
will raise that amount.
I've seen 3 numbers from 3 officers of the government. Someone said we'll do it for 8,000 crore. Someone said it'll cost us 10 to 12,000 crore. A third person said it'll cost us 20,000 crore. None of these numbers is right. Please, let's start with the...
But you were working with very high levels of premium.
I'm not. I'm telling you, once you say 10 crore families will be covered, you
That's
can't
right.
pick and choose. Everyone has to be covered on day one.
But not everybody is ill.
Wait a minute. Everyone has to be covered on day one. And you've promised 5 lakh coverage. I'm saying let's assume the average claim is 1/10 of that. Average is 1/10 of that.
5,000.
That is 50,000 rupees is the average claim. If 50,000 rupees is the average claim, there are only 2 ways to pay the hospital. One, pay as you go,
That's right.
or you cover it by insurance, right? If you pay as you go, 50,000 average claim, it will cost you 5 lakh crore, which I think is the outer limit. The extreme situation, not likely to happen. If you cover it by insurance, at current rates of premium, it will cost you per family between 5,000 to 15,000 rupees. Let's assume they beat down the premium by arm twisting the public
But
sector.
they believe that the premium is likely to be 1,000 to 1,200 rupees.
Wait a minute.
And competition
You
volumes.
can believe whatever you want to
Sure.
believe. First you say, we are going to share 60%. Somebody says government
60% by centre and 40% of
40%.
states.
Which state has agreed? Have states come on board? Therefore, we don't know what the premium is going to be. I said at current rates of premium, it is going to cost 5,000 to 15,000 per family. Let's take an average of 10,000 rupees per family. At 10,000 rupees, if you want to cover 10 crore families, it's 1 lakh crore. Premium alone. Now, I don't know what the insurance companies are going to come up with. You have an idea. You don't even have a paper. You don't have a outline. You don't have a contour of a program. You have not thought through anything. You have not spoken to states. You have not shared your concerns with insurance companies. You have not got any quotes. Yet you go and announce something and say, and what is the word? You said this is the world's largest funded government healthcare program. This is the world's largest unfunded program. Why didn't you say that? This is the world's largest program for which we still have to work out the funds.
But Mr. Chidambaram, as somebody who has been a career politician and has been a part of electoral politics, can you in principle oppose a scheme like this? Does India not require a healthcare plan?
Of course it does, but there are several models which are in force in the world. There is the US model, which is an insurance-driven model, Obamacare and the earlier
This is called Modi
Medicare.
Care.
Earlier Medicare. You know the kind of problems that have arisen in that. The other is the NHS model of UK, which is the model followed in most European countries,
That's right.
where public hospitals public healthcare facilities are expanded rapidly, and any citizen, especially the poor, who want medical care can walk in and avail of treatment. In Sweden, for example, the King of Sweden and the commoner,
they all go to the same hospital.
They go to the same hospital. If the King of Sweden, some member of the Swedish king's family delivers a baby, or a commoner's family delivers a baby, they get the same room. It's public funded, public health care. Now, these two models must be debated. You can't suddenly one day wake up and say, we're going by the insurance model. I want to see a paper that discusses these two models as well as other models. Then I want to make an intelligent choice. But governments can't act on whim. Government can't act on some brainwave that strikes somebody at midnight.
But ministers in the Modi cabinet say, and a lot of them argue, that the kind of premiums that the Congress party is calculating, or the numbers that you're projecting, are obviously very high. They expect premiums to be taken care of volumes and by competition.
Please understand one thing. If premiums are low, then the coverage is going to be low.
Yes.
The number of illnesses, diseases that will be covered will be fewer. The number of procedures that will be covered will be fewer. And it will also mean that the access to this will become more difficult. They will make access more difficult, therefore fewer people claim it.
I'll ask you a quick thing on the markets, and I will ask you on LTCG. Are you opposed to the LTCG tax that has been imposed? Because I was interviewing former Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha, and he said he was not on principle on board with this because markets are very thin and profit margins are.
You see, it depends on the context. At a certain level of GDP, at a certain level of per capita income, at a certain level of public participation in the equity market, in principle, I do not think one can oppose a long-term capital gain. But if you want the equity market to deepen, if you want rural India to invest in equity, with a risk capital, providing risk capital, you have to encourage participation in the equity market. In fact, between urban and rural India, urban India's proportion has fallen by 2.5%. Rural India, second tier and third tier towns' participation has increased by about 2.5%.
Right.
I would not oppose LTCG in principle, but I would seriously question whether this was the year in which you should introduce LTCG.
But what is wrong with this year? Because there has to, exemption for the wealthiest goes against the very grain of democracy.
Don't give me,
I will
don't
tell
give
you
me
why.
lectures about equity.
I will tell you why.
Don't give me lectures about equity.
Why should governments of the day be worried
Why
about...
didn't you do it 2 years ago then? You thought 2 years ago was...
Because we signed the deal with Mauritius, the time was perhaps right.
Why
and this has been done in a... But do you concede that this has been done in a non-disruptive sort of a way?
We don't know. The market was disrupted the next day.
But that could be... that had a lot to do with bond yields as well. That spiked by...
Could be, I don't know. So why do you call it non-disruptive? The market fell 800 points. Remember, we've already got a report which says you can get over the LTCG by going to a couple of other countries in Europe now because of the treaties. I'm not sure, unless I see all the treaties, unless I see all the current bilateral treaties, I won't be able to say that. Question is the last year of a government, given that private investments have not picked up, given that banks are unwilling to lower interest rates despite the RBI rate being cut, given that credit to industry as of December 2017 is growing by 2.1%, given all this and many other factors, I don't have the full information. Is this the right year to introduce LTCG? I think the jury's out.
So you don't really think it was the right year, but...
No, I'm not coming to any conclusion. If you give me all the information, maybe I can draw a conclusion, but I think there are a lot of voices which say this is not the right time to introduce LTCG.
You know, Hasmukh Adhia in a conversation with some of us did say very categorically that one of the reasons why the government has looked at bringing about the LTCG is to temper the exuberance in the markets. He believes there was a lot of irrational exuberance that needed to be tempered with.
I don't think it's the business of government to temper exuberance in the market. The business of government is to lay down policy and run the government. Whether the market is exuberant or not, the market will decide.
I think one of the reasons why people are talking about irrational exuberance is that a lot of retail investors have come back to the markets and they could have suffered a lot if there were to be a very big crash. I'm presuming they suffered even on Friday, but...
I've also heard voices from the government which said that there are no asset bubbles that have built up in our 4-year tenure. They've said that also. I don't know.
A quick question on jobs before I take a couple of questions on the politics of the budget. And, you know, the
finance minister, if I may interrupt you,
sure,
relied upon this wonderful research paper and took pride that 70 lakh jobs have been created.
That's right.
The least he should have done is not refer to that paper.
Why not?
Because the paper was wrong. And
I don't believe so.
Then you should have said, why rely on the paper? Then own it as your own number. Why do you say a private research paper? Even the authors of the paper no longer want to comment publicly after Jairam Ramesh and Praveen Chakravarti punctured that paper and after my column questioning the assumptions of that paper.
I'll come to job creation in just a bit, but I will, you know, one of the things that has been constantly leveled against this government is that they haven't leveraged their political mandate enough. They haven't gone in for the land or the labor reforms that they have promised they will. Do you believe they have taken a baby step with the fixed-term contractual jobs across industry segments? The finance minister believes you cannot be confrontational with the trade unions, you've got to take them along, and so these small steps is what will make up the big
What does fixed-term contract mean? That has not been explained. Will that mean amendment of labor laws? Will that mean hire and fire? Please ask them to explain all these things. We will ask these questions in Parliament. What does fixed term contract mean? Does it mean hire and fire?
So you believe unless that explanation is on,
of course, see, these are all throwaway lines. If I was writing that paragraph, I would have taken pains to explain that in at least 10 sentences.
Do you criticize the efforts that they're making on a special package for textiles, for footwear, talking about EPFO contributions being nil from new women employees?
Why should I criticize
But do you believe this will accrue to new jobs? This will lead to job creation?
I don't know. Let's see. These are measures taken in the hope that the industry will revive and jobs will be created. If those hopes materialize, I will be happy.
Do you believe, though, that this government has been able to blunt the whole Soot Boot Ki Sarkar narrative? They haven't done much for the big businesses. They're obviously grouchy. They believe in a quest to incentivize and encourage MSMEs. The big guys have been left in the lurch. They haven't got the corporate tax cuts. They've gone ahead and imposed an LTCG. Do you believe they've narrated this whole, they've blunted the whole narrative that, you know, your party had leveled against them, the whole Soot Boot Ki Sarkar?
I don't know if you go by the Rajasthan and West Bengal results. Remember, we converted a deficit of 2,26,000 to a surplus of 1,90,000. That kind of swings don't take place. The poor of Rajasthan, and there are very poor people in Rajasthan, the poor of Rajasthan, on the day the budget was presented, gave a resounding vote of no confidence in the Modi government. But I don't think they've blunted it. You see, they trumpeted demonetization, an utter disaster. They trumpeted demonetization and tried to sell it as a rich versus poor issue. If every economic decision is presented as rich versus poor, you sort of stoke class envy and class prejudices. That's not the way to run an economy.
But for a government that was constantly criticized for acting for the rich...
It is.
They're acting for the rich in this budget as well?
It is. It is. Not in this budget. Generally, this government is very, very pro-rich. Would a government spend 1 lakh crore on a bullet train in which a maximum of 1,000 people will travel by a day rather than spend the 1 lakh crore improving the infrastructure of railways.
But that's money coming from Japan specifically for the project.
Is it a gift?
But is it, it's not as if that money can be used for anything else. That's money specifically coming for that project.
Is it a gift, I want to know?
I'm presuming it isn't. I'm presuming it isn't.
It's a gift.
I'm presuming it isn't. But I'll ask you a last question. And this has to do with your party president's bus ek saal jibe that the Congress party seems to have caught on, which is, I'm sure you understand bus ek saal jibe. Yes. What does one make of that jibe? Is the Congress party telling people that we're prepared to be back in government?
I had something similar when I made my statement. I said,
thank God
this is the last budget of this government, and thank God for that.
So, is the Congress party taking claim that you're prepared to be back in government?
No. Don't jump to conclusions. All that we are saying is, you had a great opportunity. Petrol prices were down from a high of $147 during my time, average of $110 per barrel, to less than $40 a barrel. You had an economy that had a momentum behind it. Even according to your own numbers, 6.4% in the last year of UPA, rising to 7.5, rising to 8. It's since been revised to 8.2. Yeah. You had a momentum. You had a bonanza through the crude oil prices. You had a momentum. And you had a leader who had the capacity to communicate, articulate. You blew all that away. You blew all that away in a matter of 2 years. So I'm very sad. Sad for my country, sad for my people. Jobs are not created. Private investment is in the doldrums. Gross fixed capital formation is on an all-time low of 27%. Credit to industry is 2.1%. Credit to small and medium is negative. I mean, you blew this opportunity away.
So given the scenario that you're talking about, and given the fact that every $20 increase, according to the economic survey, in crude oil will affect GDP growth by 60 basis points.
Every $10 increase.
Every $10. Where do you see growth settle for next year? They're talking about levels of 7 to 7.5%.
We're talking about 17, 18 or 18, 19?
18, 19.
Well, I think 17, 18 will settle at 6.5 or below. First half was 6, and the second half cannot be 7 or certainly more than 7. Even if it is 7, this year will settle at 6.5.
Okay.
Next year, with some luck, if they don't advance elections, if they don't commit other demonetization-like disasters, growth could pick up from 6.5, say, closer to 7.
But given the tone and the tenor of the budget and the by-polls in Rajasthan, is there a concern that elections could be advanced to 2018 itself?
Well, that's a call that the Prime Minister has to take. Well, I know one thing. If anyone was thinking of a May 2018 election, that is over. May 2018 election, that's over. They were thinking of a May 2018.
That's not happening.
Remember, there was a paper which pro-BJP gentleman wrote a paper, 6+6 reasons why elections can take place in 3 months. That's over. That's blown to the pieces by Rajasthan and West Bengal. The next window now is November 2018, when Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, etc. go to polls. It's quite possible. But whether it's November 2018 or May 2019, I think the NDA government is a boat whose sails have no wind in it now.
If I may ask you a last question, I'll ask you to be candid here. We've criticized the budget over the last half an hour. Is there nothing that you like in this budget at all?
Oh, of course. Every budget will have...
what are the 3 things that you like about this budget?
Well, I haven't read every line of the budget, but I'm happy that they have kept the Maganrega allocation at the same level, because I think farm distress will continue this year, and therefore Maganrega must be protected. I'm happy they've not made many major cuts, although I have listed 7 or 8 programs where they have made marginal cuts in allocation. There are some good things. They're talking about institutes of excellence. They're talking about Udan program, connecting 2-tier and 3-tier towns. They're talking about 1 billion landings and takeoffs in airports, which means the middle class can also travel by air. Every budget, however incompetent one is, every budget will have a few nuggets, isn't it?
On that note, sir, thanks very much for speaking to us right here at TT Now.
Thank you.
It's back to you in the studios.